The stranger in the desert. The twin suns burned above the endless desert, their light turning the dunes into waves of gold. A human wanderer named Eli walked slowly across the sand, his boots sinking deep with every tired step. His water bottle was nearly empty, and the wind kept blowing hot dust against his face. He had been walking alone for 3 days, searching for a small trading post marked on his old map. Each night he slept under the open sky, and each morning he wondered if he would survive one more day. That afternoon, as the air shimmered with heat, Eli saw something strange far ahead. It looked like smoke. Twisting up from behind a dune, he frowned, adjusted the strap of his pack, and began to climb toward it. When he reached the top, he froze. Below him lay the wreck of a small silver craft half buried in the sand, metal glowing from recent fire, and beside it, motionless, was someone or something and lying face down. Eli slid down the dune, sand spilling around him. He moved carefully, hand on the handle of his knife, unsure if it was safe. When he turned the figure over, he stepped back in shock. It was a girl, but not human. Her skin pale blue with a faint silver shimmer. Her hair, long and almost white, was tangled with sand, and strange thin lines ran across her face like light beneath the skin. She was bleeding, but the blood was not red. It was glowing faintly like melted crystal. Her breathing was weak and her lips moved. Whispering something he couldn't understand, for a moment Eli hesitated. He looked at his bottle, then at her cracked lips. He didn't know who she was, or what had happened. Maybe she was dangerous. Maybe she was part of a war no one had told him about. But her face looked so lost, so helpless, that he couldn't walk away. He knelt beside her and slowly poured a few drops of water into her mouth. She gasped, her throat moving as she swallowed, and then her eyes opened, bright silver glowing softly in the sunlight. For a long second they stared at each other, human and alien. Then she spoke, her voice weak but filled with fear. "Water. Thank you." Eli nodded. "Don't talk, just rest," he said softly. He tore a piece of cloth from his sleeve and pressed it against her wound, though the wound seemed to close by itself, threads of light stitching the skin together. He watched, amazed, as the bleeding stopped and her breathing steadied. He had never seen anything like it. The desert wind howled around them, carrying the sound of distant thunder, though the sky was clear. Eli knew he couldn't stay there. Night in the dunes was freezing, and he didn't want scavengers or patrols finding them. He carefully lifted the girl into his arm. She was light, almost weightless. Her body felt warm as if it carried its own heat. He carried her toward an old mining shelter he had passed the day before, a small cave hidden by rocks. As he walked, he spoke softly even though she couldn't hear him. "Don't worry, kid. We'll find you some help." The girl's head rested against his shoulder, and for a moment he thought she smiled. When he reached the cave, he laid her on a blanket and lit a small fire. He gave her another sip of water, then sat watching the flames dance across her strange skin. She looked peaceful now, almost like a child sleeping after a long nightmare. Hours passed and darkness covered the desert. Eli stared at the stars through the cave opening. He tried to rest, but his thoughts were racing. Who was she? Where did she come from? What kind of ship was that? He had heard stories in the colonies about alien raiders, but this girl didn't look like one. She looked more like someone who had run away from a battle she never wanted to fight. At midnight, Eli heard a low hum. He turned his head and saw a faint light shining from her chest, a small crystal pendant glowing softly under her clothing. The glow pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and calm. She whispered something in her sleep, words that sounded like a prayer. Eli didn't understand the language, but somehow he felt its meaning: hope, fear, and gratitude. He sighed, leaning back against the wall. "You better wake up soon, alien girl," he murmured. "I'm running out of water." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying faint noises, not the cry of animals, but something else, engines far away. Echoing over the dunes, Eli stood, grabbed his old rifle, and stepped outside. He saw small red lights in the distance, moving across the horizon like eyes. "Someone's coming," he muttered. His heart tightening, he turned back toward the cave, where the alien girl slept peacefully, and for the first time, Eli felt he was part of something much bigger than himself. As dawn approached, the first light of the suns touched the dunes, painting them in fire and gold. Eli watched the horizon and whispered to himself, "I hope whoever's out there isn't looking for you." But deep inside, he already knew they were. He looked down at his hands, still faintly glowing where her blood had touched them, and he realized that nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The wind rose again, carrying the scent of ozone and metal. Far away, ships descended, their shadows sliding across the desert like silent beasts. And in that lonely cave, a wounded alien girl and a tired human shared the last warmth of a small fire, unaware that by sharing one bottle of water, they had just rewritten the story of two worlds. Signs in the sky, the suns rose again, spreading waves of heat across the desert. Eli woke with dry lips and aching muscles. His throat burning from thirst, he blinked, staring at the alien girl sleeping beside the dying fire, her skin glowing faintly like the last light of dawn. For a moment he thought she was gone, but then she breathed softly, her chest rising and falling. He let out a sigh of relief and rubbed his tired eyes. The wrecked ship still smoked in the distance, a twisted mark against the golden dunes. He wondered what kind of battle had left her here, and what kind of world she had come from. When he moved closer, she stirred, her silver eyes slowly opening. Her gaze met his again, calm, but filled with something deeper this time. Like recognition. "You stayed," she whispered. Her voice still weak, Eli nodded quietly. "Couldn't just leave you out there," he said, trying to sound casual though he felt nervous inside. She tried to sit up, wincing as the movement sent pain through her side. Eli reached to help, but she raised a trembling hand, a faint shimmer of light surrounding her fingers. He froze as her wounds began to close again, thin streams of glowing energy sealing the skin. In seconds, the injuries were gone, leaving only pale marks like silver veins. Eli stared in silence, his mind spinning. "Guess you heal fast," he said, half joking. Her lips curved slightly, maybe a smile, maybe pain. It was hard to tell. "I must hide," she said suddenly, voice trembling. "They will come for me." Eli frowned. "Who's they?" She didn't answer, only looked toward the horizon where the sun shimmered against the dunes. Then she whispered, "The hunters." The word carried fear, deep, ancient fear, as if even saying it might bring them closer. Eli stepped outside the cave and shaded his eyes. The desert looked empty, silent, peaceful, but the air felt heavy. Something had changed. He climbed to a nearby ridge and scanned the sky. And then he saw it. 3 red streaks slicing through the blue, like knives of fire. They weren't meteors. They moved 2 straight, 2 controlled ships descending fast. Eli's stomach tightened. "Guess you were right," he muttered. He slid back into the cave, grabbed his old rifle, and looked at her. "Friends of yours?" Her face turned pale and she shook her head. "No, they want what I carry." She reached into the small pack lying beside her and pulled out a crystal the size of her palm. Glowing bright white with soft pulses, it looked alive, humming faintly. "This is my heart beacon," she whispered. "It calls my people when the light is full." Eli looked at it, unsure what to say. "Maybe you should turn it off before those ships find us." She shook her head. "It cannot be stopped. It listens to my life as long as I breathe." It beats. Outside, the sound of engines grew louder, echoing across the canyon. Dust swirled into the cave entrance, and Eli's instincts screamed danger. He checked his rifle, old, rusty, but still loaded, and looked at her. "All right, if they're hunting you, we need to move before they land." The alien girl tried to stand but stumbled. Eli caught her, steadying her with one arm. "Easy there," he said. "You can barely walk." She looked up at him with those strange silver eyes. "You should leave me," she said, voice trembling. Eli shook his head. "Not happening." They began moving through the canyon, keeping low between the rocks. The sun baked the ground, and the air shimmered with heat behind them. The deep hum of engines turned into sharp whines. Ships landing. Eli pushed forward, guiding her toward a narrow crevice in the cliffside. When they reached it, they slipped through, emerging into a maze of stone tunnels carved by wind and time. He had explored them once long ago while searching for old mining gear. Now those same tunnels were their only hope. As they moved deeper, the light grew dim. Eli held a small glow stick, its pale light reflecting off her metallic skin. Her breathing was fast but steady, and she looked around, whispering in her language. He didn't understand the words, but the tone carried sadness and guilt. "You keep talking like you did something wrong," Eli said quietly. "What happened up there?" She didn't answer for a long time, then said softly, "I escaped." He waited, but she said no more. They stopped to rest near a small pool of collected water. Eli filled his bottle and handed it to her. She hesitated, then smiled faintly and drank, her hands shaking. When she gave it back, she looked into his eyes and said, "You saved me, human." Eli shrugged, just doing what anyone decent would do. Her voice grew softer. "Not anyone, only you." He looked away, pretending not to notice the emotion in her tone. Suddenly, the ground vibrated, a low rumble rolling through the rocks. Eli grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a boulder, through a crack in the stone. They saw a group of figures moving across the canyon floor. Tall, armored beings riding dark beasts with glowing eyes. Each carried a long spear that shimmered like plasma. The hunters had arrived. Searching, sniffing, scanning. Eli's heart pounded. The alien girl covered her mouth to silence her breathing. Eyes wide with fear, they passed by slowly, their mounts growling. When the last one disappeared into the distance, Eli exhaled shakily. "They found the crash," he whispered. The alien girl nodded, her hands trembling around the glowing crystal. "They will not stop until it is taken." Eli glanced at her, then at the endless tunnels stretching ahead. "Then we keep moving," he said, voice firm. "We hide, we survive. And maybe that thing of yours calls the right kind of people before the wrong ones catch up." She looked at him in silence, then whispered, "You are strange, human." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I get that a lot," as they vanished deeper into the canyon maze. The sky above them filled with red flashes. More ships. More hunters. The desert was no longer silent. War was coming, and somewhere beyond the dunes, something ancient had already begun to stir. The hunt begins. The desert was no longer quiet. From the far dunes came the low growl of engines mixed with the haunting cries of beasts. Eli felt the vibration under his boots, faint but steady, like the pulse of something huge approaching. He pressed his back against the canyon wall, his rifle clutched tight. Beside him, the alien girl, still weak but alert now, watched the glowing horizon with fear in her eyes. "They're close," she whispered, voice trembling. Eli nodded, sweat sliding down his neck. "Yeah, too close." The canyon around them glowed red in the distance. Flares, marking search zones the hunters had spread out, their ships circling above like birds of prey. Dust swirled in violent gusts, and every echo sounded like footsteps. Eli turned to her. "We can't stay here. They'll find us before sunrise." She gripped the crystal pendant tightly, the faint light pulsing faster. "If we go north, there's open desert," she said softly. "They will see us." Eli thought for a moment, scanning the narrow path behind them. "Then we go underground," he said, pointing toward the deeper tunnels ahead. "They used to dig mines here if we follow the old shafts. We can lose them." She hesitated, her glowing eyes flickering with fear. "There are creatures below," she whispered. "Old things that feed on light," Eli smirked tiredly. "Guess it's a lucky day for both of us." He took her hand, cold and trembling, and led her into the dark. Behind them, the canyon echoed with the roar of engines and the metallic screech of claws on rock. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. Their footsteps echoed softly on the stone floor. Eli's glow stick barely lit the way. The tunnel walls covered in strange markings, old mining codes mixed with alien symbols. The girl touched one, her fingers glowing faintly where they met the wall. "This place remembers," she murmured, her voice full of sorrow. Eli didn't ask what she meant. He just kept walking. Above them, faint explosions shook the rock, dust falling like rain from the ceiling. They reached a wide chamber filled with broken mining carts and rusted machines. Eli stopped to catch his breath, his body trembling from exhaustion. The alien girl knelt beside him and placed her hand on his arm. A soft warmth spread through him, easing the pain in his muscles. He stared at her in surprise. "You can heal others too." She nodded faintly. "A little. Not for long." Her expression grew distant. "We were healers once. Before the war." Eli was about to speak when he heard a low hiss. From the shadows at the edge of the chamber, two bright eyes blinked. Then another pair, and another. Creatures crawled out, small, insect-like, their bodies thin and covered in rough plates. They clicked their jaws and moved closer. Drawn by the light of her pendant, Eli raised his rifle. "Guess these are your old things." The girl whispered a single word, and the crystal's glow dimmed, plunging them into near darkness. The creatures hesitated, sniffing the air, then retreated slowly into the tunnels. Eli exhaled in relief. Remind me to stop questioning you." Before they could rest, a sudden boom shook the ground. A shaft of red light pierced through the rock above, a hunter's scanner beam cutting through layers of stone. "They found the tunnel," Eli said, grabbing his pack. "Move." The girl followed, her breathing quick, the crystal lighting the path with faint white pulses. Behind them, a thunderous crack split the air as part of the ceiling collapsed, sending clouds of dust through the narrow passage. Eli and the alien ran, stumbling, coughing, but never stopping. They burst out onto a ledge overlooking a deep ravine. Below, the desert stretched endlessly, glowing faintly under the twin moons. Eli looked back. The hunters' lights were moving through the tunnels like rivers of fire. "We'll never outrun them on foot," he muttered. The girl stepped forward and raised her pendant toward the sky. Its glow flared brighter than before, a silent pulse spreading through the air. "What are you doing?" Eli asked. "Calling hope," she whispered. "But it may not reach in time." From behind, a mechanical roar echoed. One of the hunter beasts climbed the ledge. A towering creature with steel claws and glowing fangs, Eli fired, the blast hitting its side. But it only staggered, shrieking with fury. The alien girl raised her hands, light swirling between her palms. A wave of energy burst outward, slamming into the creature, sending it crashing into the canyon wall. The force threw both of them backward, and Eli barely caught her before she hit the ground. Her glow faded, her body trembling from the effort. "That's it," she whispered weakly. "I can't anymore." Eli lifted her in his arms again. Heart pounding, he could hear more engines closing in. The air shimmered with heat, dust rising like smoke. He looked at the endless dunes below and made a choice. He jumped, sliding down the steep slope, sand exploding around him. They tumbled, rolled, and finally landed hard at the bottom. Coughing but alive, Eli groaned. "Next time, we take the elevator." The alien girl gave a small laugh. Tired, but real. For a moment there was silence. Only the wind, the stars, and the faint hum of the crystal still glowing weakly against her chest. Then Eli saw it, a faint blue flicker on the horizon, distant but steady. "What's that?" he asked. She smiled faintly, eyes half closed. "If they heard me, my people are coming." Eli looked toward the light, then back at her pale, fragile face. He didn't know if it was hope or madness, but he felt something powerful stir inside him, the kind of courage born not from strength, but from doing what's right even when the odds are impossible. Above them, the hunters howled into the night, but the human and the alien were still alive, still moving, and somewhere beyond the dunes, the answer to the pulse of that crystal was beginning to awaken, the hidden cavern. The night had swallowed the desert in silence. Only the whisper of wind moved between the dunes, carrying grains of sand like silver dust under the twin moons. Eli dragged his tired body through the valley floor, the alien girl leaning weakly against him. Each step felt heavier than the last, every breath full of sand and exhaustion. But he didn't stop. Not when she looked at him with those soft, glowing eyes filled with quiet trust. Far behind them, red lights moved across the dunes like ghostly fires. The hunters were still searching, their beasts roaring faintly in the distance. Eli knew they couldn't run forever. They needed shelter, something deep, hidden, unseen by scanners. Then, through the blur of heat and moonlight, he saw it, the black mouth of a cave at the base of a shattered cliff. He felt a strange pull, as if the desert itself was guiding them toward that place. "Hold on," he whispered, tightening his arm around her shoulders. She nodded faintly, too weak to speak, her pendant flickering dimly against her chest. When they reached the cave, Eli hesitated. The air inside was cool but heavy, almost humming. Still, it was their only chance. He stepped in, boots crunching over dry sand, and the sound of the outside world faded away, replaced by a deep, endless quiet. The passage twisted downward, wide enough for two people, and the walls were covered in strange symbols. They glowed faintly when the girl passed her hand near them. Eli watched, confused. "You've been here before?" She shook her head slowly. "No, but my people. We built such places long ago." He frowned. "You mean your kind lived here before humans came?" Her voice grew soft, almost sad. Before even the stars were mapped, they reached a large chamber at the end of the tunnel. The air shimmered with faint blue light from veins of crystal running through the walls. In the center stood a round platform covered with dust and broken shards of stone. Eli helped her sit and then dropped to his knees, breathing hard. "This place," she whispered. It remembers. Eli looked around, unsure what she meant. But then the walls began to hum, low, deep like a heartbeat. Her pendant answered with a pulse of light. And the crystals on the walls flickered in rhythm. Eli stepped back, alarmed. What's happening? She looked up at him with calm eyes. It recognizes the heart beacon. The floor beneath them lit up, revealing old symbols like spirals, stars, and waves, telling stories of a race that had lived among deserts before humans ever dreamed of crossing galaxies. Eli felt small standing inside history itself. Your people left this behind, he murmured. She nodded faintly. We thought we were alone, but now, I see we were wrong. He crouched beside her, watching as she ran her fingers across one glowing stone. Her voice trembled as she spoke. My family. My clan, they fell in battle. The rebels hunted us across systems. I was the last to escape. Eli listened silently, feeling a strange ache in his chest. You've been running ever since, he said quietly. She nodded, tears glimmering in her silver eyes. I thought dying in the desert would be peace. He smiled sadly. Not while I'm around. She looked at him for a long time, then whispered, Humans, you always give when nothing is left. Before Eli could answer, the sound of stone cracking echoed through the tunnel. Dust fell from the ceiling and he heard the deep growl of something massive. They've found us, he said, grabbing his rifle. The alien girl rose unsteadily, her pendant glowing brighter. Wait, she said. There's another way. She stepped to the platform's edge and pressed her palm against the crystal surface. The floor shifted and a hidden passage opened below, revealing a staircase spiraling down into blue light. Eli stared in disbelief. You've got to be kidding. She smiled faintly. Our ancestors were good at hiding. They descended quickly, the stairs vibrating under each step as if alive. Below, the air turned cooler and the hum of the crystals grew louder. At the end of the stairway was a second cavern, vast and breathtaking, filled with glowing water flowing through transparent stone channels. The entire place felt sacred. Untouched for centuries, Eli walked slowly, awed by the light reflecting off the water and walls. The alien girl knelt near the stream, touching the surface with her fingertips. The glow of her pendant spread through the liquid, sending ripples of silver light across the chamber. What is this? He asked softly. Our memory, she whispered. Each drop carries our stories, our songs, our history. Eli stood silent, realizing this wasn't just a cave. It was a living monument, a temple of her kind's past. For a moment, all the fear and running faded away, replaced by peace. But peace never lasted long in the desert. A sudden explosion tore through the upper tunnel, the sound shaking the entire chamber. The hunters had found the entrance, their growls echoing down the stairs. Eli raised his rifle, eyes cold. Looks like they're not interested in history, he muttered. The alien girl stood beside him, the crystal in her chest burning bright white now. If they enter here, she said quietly, I must use the light, but it may take everything I have. Eli turned to her sharply. No, you're not dying here, not after all this. She smiled sadly. You gave water to a dying stranger, Eli. Now I give you a chance to live. Before he could stop her, she stepped onto the glowing platform again, arms outstretched. The crystals in the walls flared alive, the air trembling with power. A beam of blinding white light erupted upward through the ceiling. Far above the desert, the storm cloud split, and the signal shot into the stars. Eli shielded his eyes, shouting her name. When the light faded, she collapsed to the ground, motionless. The cavern was quiet again, except for the sound of distant explosions above. Eli knelt beside her, heart pounding, and whispered, You did it. Whatever it was, you did it. But as he lifted her into his arms, the pendant still pulsed faintly, and somewhere far beyond the dunes, ancient horns began to echo. The chase through dust. The ground shook beneath Eli's boots as the first blast hit the cliff above. Rocks crashed down from the ceiling, turning the glowing cavern into chaos. He held the alien girl in his arms, her body limp but still breathing, the crystal on her chest flickering like a dying star. The light from her beacon had reached the heavens, but the hunters had followed its trail. From above came the roar of engines and the rumble of beasts, their claws scraping against stone. Hang on, Eli whispered, adjusting her weight, his muscles trembling from exhaustion. He looked up at the cracked ceiling where streaks of red light sliced through the dust. The hunters were breaking through. He needed to move now. He tightened his grip on his rifle and ran toward the back of the cavern, searching for a way out. The blue glow of the crystal water guided him like veins of starlight. Leading deeper into the mountain behind him, the hunters poured into the chamber, tall, armored figures with glowing visors and spears that hissed with fire. Their beasts leapt forward, snarling. Eli turned and fired, the recoil shaking his arm, the blast striking a wall of stone and sending shards flying. He ducked behind a rock as a spear exploded nearby, scattering molten fragments that burned through his jacket. The alien girl stirred faintly in his arms, whispering words he couldn't understand. "Stay with me," he said, voice rough. "We're not done yet." He spotted a narrow tunnel at the far edge of the chamber, small enough that the hunters' mounts couldn't follow. Without thinking, he sprinted toward it, bullets of plasma scorching the ground around his feet. The tunnel curved sharply, its floor uneven, and every step sent pain through his legs, but Eli kept moving, driven by something beyond fear, a promise, a spark of purpose that had grown since the day he found her. Behind them, roars echoed through the stone, the beast smashing through debris. The sound grew closer with every second. They burst out into open air. The night sky stretched wide above them, filled with dust and fire. The twin moons hung low, glowing red through the storm that raged across the desert. Ships circled overhead, their spotlights cutting through the swirling sand. Eli set the girl down gently against a rock and aimed his rifle, taking slow, steady shots. Each shot echoed across the dunes, flashes lighting up his face with grit and determination. The alien girl opened her eyes, weak but awake now. Her voice was soft. "Why do you fight for me?" Eli reloaded quickly, never looking away from the horizon. "Because no one else will," he said simply. Her eyes shimmered with tears. "You're a strange creature. Human." He gave a tired smile. "Yeah, you're not the first to say that." A blast hit nearby, throwing sand into the air. Eli grabbed her hand and pulled her to her feet. They ran through the storm, the wind screaming around them. The dunes shifted underfoot, glowing with flashes from the battle above. Every breath burned, every step felt like the last, but ahead, he saw shapes, dark outlines rising from the storm. Ruins, towers buried half in sand. "Over there," he shouted. "We can hide." They stumbled into the ruins, broken stone arches and strange metallic pillars marked with alien carvings. The girl's pendant began to glow again, brighter now, resonating with the symbols around them. "This place," she whispered. "It was once a temple of my people." The air vibrated with deep energy, as if the stones themselves were waking up. Before Eli could respond, the ground shook again. The hunters had found them. Their ships descended, beams of red light sweeping across the ruins. Eli pulled her behind a fallen column, panting. He checked his rifle. Only 2 charges left. The alien girl looked at him, her expression calm despite the chaos. "If they capture me," she said softly, "they'll take the beacon. And you will die too." Eli frowned. "Not gonna happen." She reached out and touched his hand, her fingers glowing faintly. "Then take this," she said, pressing the crystal pendant against his palm. He shook his head. "No, it's yours." "It's ours now," she whispered. "You shared your water, I share my light." Before Eli could answer, a massive shadow landed nearby, the leader of the hunters. He was twice the size of the others, his armor black and pulsing with red energy. He raised his spear, voice booming. "Human, surrender the beacon, and your death will be painless." Eli stood tall, dust swirling around him. "You want it?" he said, gripping the pendant tight. "Come and take it," the beast charged, claws tearing into the sand. Eli fired his last shot, a direct hit to the creature's eye. It roared and stumbled. Collapsing into the ruins, the explosion threw both Eli and the girl to the ground. The pendant flew from his hand, landing in the sand between them, its light flaring so bright that even the hunters shielded their eyes. And then a sound filled the air, deep echoing horns carried by the wind. The hunters froze, turning toward the horizon. Eli blinked through the dust, seeing massive shadows moving through the storm. At first he thought they were mountains, but they were moving, slowly, powerfully, gigantic beasts covered in silver armor, their riders holding banners that glowed like fire. The alien girl gasped, tears streaming down her face. "My people," she whispered, her voice breaking. They heard the call. The hunters began to retreat, shouting orders, their ships lifting off in panic. The sky lit up with blue light as the approaching army of riders broke through the storm, their horns shaking the very ground. Eli dropped to his knees, exhausted. The alien girl leaned against him, smiling weakly. "You did it," he said. Still breathless, she looked up at the glowing horizon, her voice a whisper of awe. "No, Eli, we did it together." The first of the riders dismounted, walking toward them through the storm, armor shining like starlight. Eli tightened his grip on his rifle, not sure if they were friend or foe. But the rider bowed deeply before the girl and spoke in a voice that echoed like thunder. "The daughter of Thray is found." The storm began to fade, the air clearing as moonlight returned to the desert. Eli stood beside her, unsure what would come next. He looked at the pendant still glowing between them, realizing that the light inside was not just alien. It was human too now. Born from kindness, from one small act that had changed everything. The signal of the heart. The storm slowly began to calm. The desert that had been screaming all night now breathed in silence. Eli stood on trembling legs, dust swirling around him, his rifle hanging uselessly at his side. His ears still rang from the explosion, his eyes burning from sand and smoke. But when he looked up, he forgot the pain. Out of the storm came shapes. Towering beasts covered in silver-blue armor, their hooves pounding against the sand like thunder. Their riders glowed with faint light beneath flowing cloaks, banners rippling in the wind. They moved with purpose, with pride, with something ancient that made the air feel sacred. Eli's heart pounded, his throat dry. Beside him, the alien girl, the one he had once found dying in the sand, slowly stood, her pendant shining again, stronger than ever. The first rider dismounted, tall, graceful, eyes like molten silver. He bowed his head low before her. "Daughter of Thray," he said in a deep voice that echoed through the valley. The call of the heart beacon was heard across the sands of light. "We have come." Eli took a step back, unsure if he should even breathe. The girl, no, the princess, as he now understood, lifted her hand weakly. "Many fell to protect it," she said softly. "But a human carried the light when I could not." The riders murmured, their glowing eyes turning toward Eli. He felt smaller than ever, a wanderer lost among gods. The leader turned to him, his voice calm yet heavy with power. "You gave water to one of ours when the stars turned away," he said. "For that, your name will be sung in the halls of Thray." Eli blinked, his throat tightening. "I didn't do it for songs," he muttered. "She just needed help." The leader smiled faintly. "And that is why you are worthy." The other riders dismounted, forming a circle around them. They began to hum softly, deep rhythmic tones that made the air vibrate. The sand around the alien girl began to glow, forming swirling patterns like galaxies. Her pendant pulsed in harmony, sending waves of light across the dunes. Eli watched, awestruck as her skin shimmered brighter, the cracks of exhaustion disappearing. It was like watching someone reborn. Her wounds were gone, her strength returned, her eyes once again full of that fierce silver light. She turned to him, her voice steady now. "Eli, do you know what you carried?" He shook his head slowly. She placed her hand over his chest, right where his heart beat. "The beacon does not only call across space," she said. "It listens too." He frowned slightly. "Listens to what?" "To kindness," she whispered, "to courage, to the small things that matter when hope is lost." Eli stared at her. Words caught in his throat. The pendant in her hand began to glow brighter, the light spilling over both of them. He felt warmth spread through his body, not heat but something deeper, a calm, peaceful pulse matching the rhythm of his own heart. The leader of the riders raised his spear high and the beasts roared in unison. The light from the pendant shot into the sky, splitting the clouds above them. The twin suns burned brighter, and for a brief moment, it felt as if the entire desert bowed in silence. Then from behind the dunes, the sound of engines rose again. The hunters, still chasing. Eli tensed, but the riders didn't move. The leader looked toward the horizon, his eyes glowing brighter. "They do not understand what they have awakened," he said quietly. He raised his hand and the beast let out a deafening roar. The very ground shook as the riders charged forward, their weapons glowing blue. In moments the sky filled with light, flashes of energy, roaring engines, thunder that cracked through heaven itself. Eli shielded his eyes, watching as the Thray warriors moved like a living storm. Their energy spears cut through the hunters' machines, their beasts tearing across the battlefield like comets. He had never seen anything so powerful, So graceful, so terrifying. The alien girl stood beside him, her voice calm. They fight not for war, but for balance. He looked at her. Balance? She nodded. The beacon doesn't just summon armies. It restores what was broken. As the battle raged, the leader returned, his armor scarred but his stance proud. The sands are cleansed, he said. The hunters flee. Eli looked across the desert. The ships were burning in the distance, smoke rising like dark clouds against the twin suns. The air was filled with the smell of ozone and victory, but also something else. Peace. The kind of peace that comes when a long chase finally ends. The alien girl turned to Eli, her expression soft. I thought I would die alone, she said quietly. But you showed me something my people had forgotten. He smiled faintly. What's that? She looked into his eyes. That mercy is not weakness. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind moved softly between them. Carrying the scent of sand and starlight, the leader of the Thray approached again and extended a small silver crest shaped like a star. He handed it to Eli. The mark of the water-bearer, he said. A title given once in 1,000 years. Eli stared at the crest. Feeling its warmth against his skin, he didn't know what it meant. But somehow it felt right. The alien girl smiled. You are part of our story now. He looked up at the rising suns and whispered, Guess that makes us even. She laughed softly, the sound like wind chimes in the desert breeze. As the Thray riders prepared to leave, the ground trembled once more. From the heart of the dunes, beams of light rose high, connecting earth and sky, signals spreading outward. The beacon was no longer just a call for help. It was a promise, a link between two worlds sealed by a single act of kindness. Eli watched as the riders mounted their beasts and began to disappear into the horizon. The alien girl lingered a moment longer, her eyes full of gratitude. When you gave me water, she said softly, you gave life to more than one soul. He nodded slowly. And when you shared your light, he replied, you reminded me what it means to be human. The desert winds rose again, warm and gentle now. And as the last of the riders vanished into the glowing sands, Eli stood alone under the twin suns. But for the first time in his life, he didn't feel alone at all. The gift of the Thray. The morning light touched the desert softly. Golden rays slid across the endless dunes where the battle had ended. The air was calm again, the sand still warm from the fire of yesterday. Eli stood alone at the ridge, the wind pulling gently at his torn jacket. He could still hear the fading echo of alien horns far in the distance. The Thray riders had gone, but their presence lingered like a song that refused to fade. He looked down at his hands, scratched, burned, and still faintly glowing from the alien's touch. Everything felt unreal. Just days ago, he had been a lonely wanderer, a nobody, walking across the desert praying for one more drop of water. Now he had seen armies rise, light split the sky, and kindness shake the stars. He exhaled slowly, his heart heavy and full all at once. A soft sound made him turn. The alien girl was there, standing a few steps away. She wore new robes, flowing and radiant, silver symbols embroidered into the cloth. Her skin glowed faintly under the morning sun, her silver eyes calm but full of warmth. For the first time, she didn't look like a lost survivor. She looked like a leader, a being born from both power and peace. Eli smiled faintly. Didn't think I'd see you again? She walked closer, her voice gentle. You were not meant to be left behind. He shrugged lightly. Didn't seem like I'd fit in with your flying army. She tilted her head, her lips curving into a small smile. And yet, you fit in everywhere. For a moment, they stood in silence, the desert wind weaving around them like a quiet melody. Behind her, the ground began to tremble again. Not from war this time, but from something vast and alive. From beyond the dunes came the sound of great beasts marching, slow and rhythmic, then through the golden haze. Eli saw them, the Thray riders returning. But this time they came not for battle, but for ceremony. Their banners shimmered in the sun, and their armor reflected the light like living fire. The leader rode forward, dismounted, and bowed deeply. Human Eli, he said, his deep voice echoing like thunder over calm waters. The Council of Thray has spoken. Your act of mercy will be remembered for all cycles to come. Eli blinked, uncertain. Council? I'm no hero. The leader's gaze softened. Heroes never believe they are. The alien girl stepped beside the leader and lifted a small silver sphere that glowed with inner light. It floated above her palm, humming softly. "This is the seed of harmony," she said. "A gift from the Thray to the children of Earth." Eli frowned slightly. "A gift?" She nodded. "It grows only when planted by hands that give without expecting return." She placed it gently in his hands. The light pulsing once, warm and steady, Eli stared at it, feeling its rhythm match his heartbeat. "What does it do?" he asked quietly. "It listens," she said with a smile, "to hearts like yours." The leader raised his spear, and all the riders struck their weapons into the sand in unison. The ground glowed beneath their feet, spreading circles of light across the dunes. The entire desert seemed to breathe, alive. Connected, awake, Eli looked around, overwhelmed. "What's happening?" The alien girl looked toward the rising suns, her voice soft and proud. "The sands remember your kindness," she said. "They will carry your name with the wind." The riders began to chant, their voices deep and harmonic. It wasn't a song of victory, but of unity. A song about a human who gave water to a stranger when he had nothing left, and how that act had called light into a dying world. Eli listened in silence, his eyes glistening. He had never felt smaller or more seen when the chant ended. The leader placed his hand on Eli's shoulder. "You are no longer wanderer," he said. "You are now water-bearer of the stars, keeper of the bond between our kinds." Eli tried to speak but couldn't. The alien girl smiled gently. "It means your story will never die." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "Guess that's one way to make sure I'm not forgotten." She reached out and fastened the pendant, the same one she once carried, around his neck. The crystal glowed faintly, merging with the silver crest he wore from before. "Now the light belongs to you too," she whispered. He touched it carefully, feeling warmth flow through him again. For the first time, he didn't feel like just a traveler. He felt connected, part of something far greater than himself. The leader raised his hand and the riders began to depart once more, their beasts moving like waves across the sand, their banners shining against the golden sky. Eli and the alien girl stood side by side, watching as the light faded into the horizon. "Will I ever see you again?" he asked softly. She looked at him, her silver eyes reflecting the sun's. "When the stars whisper your name," she said, "you will know I am near." He nodded slowly. His heart full, the wind brushed past them, carrying the faint echo of distant horns, the kind that sang not of war but of peace. Eli turned toward the desert, the seed of harmony glowing faintly in his hands. He smiled, whispering to himself, "One drop of water," and the whole universe changed. As the suns rose higher, their light spilled across the sands, the desert shimmered with quiet beauty, and the story of a human and a wounded alien became legend, a legend whispered by wind, written in light, and carried forever across the stars.